Okay, one desert planet to another potentially desolate planet. We're going to Raised by Wolves.
Ooh.
Um, as you mentioned in your tweet there, we talked Ridley Scott everything last week. So that was in the name of this
Mhm,
show coming back for a season two.
mhm,
So we're gonna get spoilery. Um, Season two, episodes one and two. Now I know there's a third episode out. We're just be talking about the first two thus
mhm.
far.
Yep.
Um, I think we both agreed that at the end of season one, things were getting a little
Weird.
iffy. Yes, they're
Mhm,
getting stranger. Things were happening fast. Like I'm a little confused here.
mhm,
Now, when this started, after not long, I was like, I think that I would have been more okay with the end of season one if I had was able to go right into this
mhm,
because some things started to make more sense to
mhm.
me. How about you? What do you think of the opening here, of season one, season two here?
Yeah, it was a little frenetic at first, but like you said, I think if we'd been able to transition into it quicker from season 1, the end of season 1 might not have seemed so weird. I think there were still weird elements. I'm still
Hmm.
very not convinced about this snake thing
Okay,
and what is going on with it. It's still very strange to me.
it's all part of Soul's plan, if you ask me.
It's the sword that Soul wants you to use for the prophecy.
Isn't that the way that religious prophecy goes? I mean, you just like, well, I saw a bird, and I
Well, that's the
think,
way, like, I mean, any prophecy could go, I
yeah,
saw
right.
I saw a
It's just
bird or
like
a
we just
stone
try
or
to
yeah.
interpret whatever we can. It
Yeah.
was like that our minds work
I
up.
mean, the episodes do present a pretty good job of saying, like, really people wanna believe, so they make anything into, what they want it to. Because obviously Marcus is talking about this prophecy and pulls out, like, a little penknife that he picks off of Mother, and he's like, "Is
Yeah.
this the sword?" And then, 20 minutes later,
It's a
the chickie
sword for
like,
ants.
"The home for tiny people?" Um, and then 20 minutes later, the new woman that he's found, is talking about the flying snake thing as the sword. So it's like really, kind of points out the, you know, I don't know, very stretchy nature of prophecy and how it can be molded to fit, your
Yeah.
reality and what you want it to. So
Yep. So looking at
yeah, that
episode
was a big
one.
jump ahead. Obviously, I was like
No,
in
yeah.
into two, but I just wanted to overall comment. I feel like the parts with
Yeah.
the flying snake creature really still do take me out of the show a little bit. I feel like I'm so
Okay.
grounded in this world and in the relationships that, mother and father are building with the children, now with the collective that we're being introduced to. Uh, I really feel that some of the most interesting things are happening at this very granular level, and I just get kind of ripped out of those um whenever we deal with this snake monster
Yeah.
thing.
I know what you mean because the despite its sort of um high science fiction, way in the future technology beyond our, you know, uh even close to our
Mhm.
possibilities at this point. It feels quite real, and they focus on the characters and dealing with humanity and how religion works and doesn't work and all this stuff. That everything does feel real. So we're about the characters, and so when you do take something, I think one, it does allow for something that's a little more fantastical because you can
Yeah.
feel grounded so many other ways. I also get what you're saying where it can feel out of place. Because for me, like when I can't think of his name right now. New Praise Soul guy. He is
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I should write
The
down their
tattoo
names.
face guy. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, when his ship is sinking, then he like kind of grapple shots himself off of it with this like sort of energy grapple
Oh,
beam.
Marcus.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Marcus.
Our
And so he's
Mithril
like
guy.
kind
Yeah,
of
yeah, yeah.
pulling the ship for a while, and then
Wolf.
he
Yeah.
just like It's like,
That was
okay, I
that
mean,
was some
all
rough
this other
effects.
technology, I can see this being possible, but I don't know that I bought that happening right there. So, or the way
That's
it was
so funny,
done
because I had trouble with that too, and it was really just that last portion. I bought
with a
the
cut.
grapple hook. Yeah, that, like, jump cut where he, is,
Yeah.
like, pulling himself or pulling the ship and therefore pulling himself, I bought, and then suddenly, like, the ship was too far gone in the acid water, and he just, like, skip hopped over to
Yeah.
get to the rock, and it really seemed like the ship was a fair distance yet
Yeah.
from any sort of shore. That's terrible.
Because it was like, what I imagine is they shot it and they're like, okay, if we do this and show him flying through the air, essentially, it's going to look silly. It's kind of like you have to be careful with if you make Wonder Woman 1984 and you have Wonder Woman running down the street, it can look silly. You got
Yes.
to manage these things.
Yes.
Um, and so they like, well, we're not going to do that. We're not going to show that part. So we'll show how it starts and how it ends. But what it ends up feeling like then is amateur or someone with a lower budget because you do it
Yes.
all the time.
Oof,
You do it all the
yes.
time where you start a motion and then you cut to the other side that is not part of that at all. It can just kind of fall on the ground.
Mhm.
So that's what it ended up feeling. It felt cheap, you know.
Mhm.
So
I completely agree with that. Yeah. And yeah, it's some of these things that I'm so surprised work so well and some that don't. And, obviously this moment didn't work for both of us. And I'm still working out. I think the visual effects are great on this snake monster thing. I'm just having a hard time working it into feeling like it fits.
yeah, because well, it does feel like where did this come from really?
Mhm.
Other than like inspiration from Geiger that, hey, here's a giant penis coming out of a mouth. Like other than that, like how does this fit in to
Right.
the aesthetic and what's happening? And so hopefully the mystery pays off. That's the thing. The mystery has to pay off of
It
what this giant
does.
serpent is.
They're continuing to delay us and give us little tidbits of information. Now we have a bond between it and Campion.
Hmm.
Campion's, trying to say like, "Oh, I feel like it was trying to communicate with me." It obviously tries to
Right.
communicate with Mother. So we're getting something here, but that still doesn't mean I'm convinced of a good payoff because it does often feel so out in left field. And I don't feel
Right.
that way about other things that have been introduced that are, creature like. Um,
Sure.
talking about the
Yeah,
collective,
those
like
like dogs and stuff.
yeah, talking about the collective, the trust, like the being that is the center of the collective.
The
That
AI.
yeah,
Hmm.
it's AI but organic, but it doesn't feel. I don't know. It doesn't feel like it doesn't belong there. It feels somebody designed something that feels very part of this world to me, and I
Hmm.
think it could have been, the other way. I think it could have been designed very oddly, um, where it would misfit. But yeah, so it's just hard for me. I feel like I'm
Hmm.
dwelling on it a lot, but I can't help it because it is the thing that takes me out so often.
Sure. Well, we should talk about the AI, about the
Yeah.
trust, because we kind of almost start there, and we get to
Mhm.
find out that both Mother and the trust were both made by Campion, but the original
The
Camp.
original OG.
Yeah. So they're like siblings in a way, and she's
Mhm.
familiar with. So she's familiar and mentions the quantum six, like the
Mhm.
unfallible quantum six or something like that.
Yes.
So that's very interesting.
Yeah,
And
definitely
they
interested
said
to
in
hear
the
about that.
yeah. So where's that come into play? And you wrote in your comments about kind of like the Westworld computer. It
Yeah.
definitely is
Right?
that sort of thing. That the idea that humans are not in a space. So I I love this show like Westworld because of all these fun questions it brings up.
Mhm.
And so it's kind of this idea that if we're atheists and we don't have something else to look to for order and guidance, what do we look to? And if
Mhm.
we think that at the state that humans are too fallible, doesn't it make sense to create something that is calculating and logical, because that's always the striving element there. It's, so it's
Mhm.
that battle of theology versus and faith versus logic. So the
Mhm.
ultimate logic machine is literally a logic machine, an AI.
Mhm.
But how does that end up actually working out for something that is so emotion driven and feelings driven and that kind of thing, as a human is?
Yeah, yeah. Um, and I think one of the interesting things that the show brings up is even the question of how we define atheism, because you know Campion and Paul are talking to each other, and Paul is saying something, and he's like, "Well, you can't understand. You don't believe in anything." And sorry, I said Paul was telling Campion this. I hope in the right order. Paul was saying that to Campion, and Campion comes back with, "Well, no, I'm not an atheist because
Not right,
I do believe in something. I just don't
right,
believe the same story
in
that you do." And it was very
right.
interesting because it's like, is atheism really just like the total lack of belief in anything? I mean, that seems so illogical, you know.
I was having this conversation with some people last week, and it was, it's like the idea of being an atheist is not having a belief in an organized religion,
Right,
was how they framed it. So that's kind of specific. That's
right.
not saying that
You
you
don't believe in
don't believe
anything.
in a higher power, or you name it, whatever, you know. Um, yeah. So I don't know if that's really the proper definition. But to me that kind of makes sense.
Right, and it's what I've thought of, but this show obviously kind of takes it in a little bit different direction. And the characters we're talking about are children, so sometimes children, no matter what age, can have a little bit more simplistic viewpoints and understandings. Where
Right.
Campion saying like, "Well, I'm not an atheist because I believe in something," could be wrong, but it's an interesting point for the show to bring up as, these are the atheists. Well, what do we think atheist means? What does Campion think it means? How is that going to be problematic, potentially down the line in the show if Campion learns, well, just because I believe in things doesn't mean I'm not still an atheist, or maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's
Right.
can't be classified as an atheist.
What I had pointed out to me now was that it's silly, I never thought of it.
Mm.
Every time you say like atheist, you're saying atheist.
Yeah.
Kind of like contradictory to what it is. I mean, I understand it's more like asexual and you're
Yes,
but it's still and from in
because
another
you don't say
sense.
asexual.
Yeah. So
But yes, it
um
it it is very funny that that's
yeah.
kind of the way, just grammatically, that works out.
Hmm. Um so speaking of Campion in this moment, might as well use that to
Mm.
talk about how Mother is clearly setting up conflict between the two of them going forward. Because at first there is a little like probably some sort of weird thing with, well, this is my mother, but she's going to have another child, and then the child's dead. He tries to give sympathy. He's like, oh, it's fine, no worries, it's okay. But how she is so set on Campion taking the torch from the system, from
The
the we
trust.
were just talking about, yeah, the trust, when it
Yeah, it
decides to
took me a minute to
hand it over.
realize what the trust was, that was, like, the name for the AI there. I thought perhaps it was like an actual trust, a group of
Mm,
people, and then it took
right,
me a minute to realize, no, 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 like, this is all AI run.
right. So I don't know, I think that
Yeah.
because immediately she's like, he's gonna run it, he's, the perfect atheist society we're gonna have here. It's all this like dreamy wishy-washy stuff yet.
Mhm.
And then quickly we see like the darker side of it, and then on top of it, Campion proclaiming that he's not an atheist. So
Mhm.
I don't know. Thought that was interesting, and um,
Yeah, I
Mother
mean,
is yeah, go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say it like you said, it clearly sets up conflict, um, not only between Campion and, the other members of her family that she's created here, but also between Campion and the Trust, I imagine,
Yeah,
because of course, like we're being thrown hints, subtle and not subtle, that the Trust is not going to be giving up its power. That
right.
it's not going to be ever handing the torch off to humans because it will never, ironically, trust that humans can
Yeah.
take care of themselves. So she's setting up a lot of conflicts here with her hard push for Campion to take over the collective.
Yep. I I I wrote somewhere at some point it's like, okay, yeah, when it hands over control,
Yeah.
that's you keep thinking that.
Yeah.
Um you just know that's not going to happen. And why would it? Like a perfect machine that's calculating things based solely on what
Mhm.
it deems is what's the prime directive? If it's to
Mhm.
have the least loss of life of members of the collective, well, there could be a lot to that.
Mhm.
Um, you know, and it's the machine is never going to make the decision that a hero has to at the end of something where it's okay, save the person in distress, love of your life, or save the world. And then
Mhm.
the hero chooses to save the love of their life and somehow manages to save the world too.
Mhm.
The AI is going to choose to save the world,
Mhm.
period. So it's yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I had several different thoughts, like, very very different reactions. I love this kind of stuff where you bring up these like hypotheticals, like how would a human respond, how would an AI respond. Um, so my first response, um, was about the trust ever giving up power. I feel like the first couple of episodes of the show really set up the fact that no one in the current collective is really worthy of giving that power to.
Right.
When mother and father and their band of children arrive and they're all like, "Oh, check out these people."
Yeah.
And
These
Sue
are what we should aspire to be. Yeah.
right, even Sue is like, "Well, the people who survive the end of the world aren't exactly the greatest
Yeah.
people." So we're very much introduced right away to the concept that like nobody here is really worthy of taking over for the trust. Kind of feels like the trust knows that. But is that kind of setting us up for, okay, well, only Campion maybe could be that person, and how is that going to go? Because since
Yep.
there's nobody else here, we don't have to worry about kind of other contenders. We really just have to worry about the trust versus Campion versus, by extension, mother. um so that was kind of my immediate thought. um Another thought that I had was, you know, really, we saw this so much in the first season, and now we're really, I feel like, seeing it on an accelerated rate in the first two episodes. Mother and father are changing, and they are
Yeah.
becoming more human and having more pronounced human traits.
Yeah.
Like guilt and shame, hiding things, lying to themselves, lying to other people,
Yeah.
jealousy, blackmail. I mean, so clearly we're seeing that AI can evolve and they could be, taking on those, what we call like hero choices, saving the people they love versus saving the world because they're not so cold and detached. I don't think the trust is ever going to get to that
Right.
level. It doesn't seem capable, perhaps because it doesn't look human, so I don't believe that it can, take on human characteristics where
Sure.
for mother and father, they look like people, so it's easier for me to believe that. I don't know. But it's it's again one of those interesting things that, Westworld explores, we're exploring here too. What's the line between AI and human? How do
Mhm.
we how do we divide, and what happens when the lines start to get crossed, blended, mixed, you know?
Yeah, and like, so you say in Westworld they explore this. It's is this realistic at all? I mean, so obviously the most simple form, machine learning, per the name, learns after repeated trial and error, fed more data, all that stuff like that. And AI is able to do this as well and learn. But is it going to learn is it going to learn the value of human emotion? Like, is that something that would be learned by something that
Mhm.
doesn't feel? Because I mean, we feel because of chemicals that fire off and go to our brain and make us react in weird ways. Machines don't have that element. Like, what is going to propel them to learn to have a more animalistic side of the brain when all they've got is, you know, cerebral function? All they've got is calculation. I don't I just don't know if this leap, because it's fun to explore because it makes us talk about humanity.
Right.
But is it feasible at all?
Well, yeah, I mean, you raise a very good question. Um, certainly we would have to know more, I think, in this world about AI construction. Perhaps the answer lies in quantum 6, whatever that might
Yeah.
be, whatever we could unpack around that mystery. Um, the show seems to suggest that um through the pregnancy and subsequent birth of Snake Thing, which is some sort of biotech, that there's some capacity for mixing there.
Yeah.
You know
Right.
what I mean? Like something
It's like
stronger than,
Battlestar.
yeah,
Yeah.
something stronger than just like we created a humanoid AI or humanoid service, you know, drone, bot, whatever, machine. It seems to suggest that there's a way to pair those. So I think the show makes a lot of leaps in that way that suggests that this can be done without explaining precisely the technology, but perhaps
Mhm.
in this season we're going to be getting those explanations.
Yeah. I think it's maybe just a thing that's so far it's so well done now. The assume
Like
audiences
Westworld
will,
is the base kind of thing.
yeah, they assume
Yeah,
that the
we
people are gonna
accept
go
it.
along for this ride. Yeah.
Mhm.
So we gotta write something, Andrea, that
Mhm.
more precisely explores
Right.
this. Um so let's see. Yeah, we've got the whole community here.
Mhm.
Pretty interesting how that's set up. New system. We see immediately how some people are like, yeah, I'm perfectly good taking orders from the trust, serving the collective. And other people are like, aren't you tired of that? Like, do you want to make a decision for yourself for once? So then the irony is that this person leaves and
Ugh,
is sold on the religion based on you get to be you and make your own choices.
which is
So
which is
it's a
hilarious
complete
because you don't.
well, I mean, but it's for a lot of things, it depends on your religious leader. Now, ultimately, then it's not your choice because your leader is granting you the ability of the autonomy.
Exactly.
But in this atheist society, living free, living logically, you definitely aren't. So the absence of an organized religion based on a higher power is not granting you the freedoms you may have
Yeah.
pursued.
Yeah, what I thought was really funny in the way, and by funny I mean, ironic, interesting, a little bit, giving me a wry chuckle here, is pitting these two kind of belief systems, and they are belief systems, no matter what you say
Hmm.
about, atheism. It's, perhaps not a belief in a higher God or a higher, power that you can't define and name like you can in AI. But it's still certainly a belief system because you believe in this
Yep.
technology and you believe in this way of life. So these two belief systems are pitted against one another. Um, And in either course, the followers don't get any sort of real freedoms.
Right.
And they're not free from being told what to do or what to think, because
Right.
the moment this refugee from the collective escapes and finds Marcus and is rescued, Marcus begins telling him how to think. He's couching it in, you can choose to be you. I want you to be what Soul created you to be. But he's
Yep.
nevertheless telling him how to think, because you need to think in terms of Soul gave you this and Soul gave you that. And you're free to do with these gifts what you will, but just you need to remember that Soul gave them to you. So in a way, he's like offering freedom, and he's actually not. He's actually offering
Yeah.
just a different belief system, but couched in terms of you get to decide. But it's made very
Yep.
clear that he doesn't. So,
Yep. Yeah. It's kind of like, if you're going to be part of the commune, then you have to you're f- do what we say, and then you're free.
hmm
So it's not really free. And then but it relies more on you believing in the cause. So if you believe in the cause, if you
yeah,
believe in the structure, you believe in the trust, then you kind of are free because you believe in it. So what you're told to do makes sense. Of course you'd say yes because
hmm
you believe in it. And so,
right,
yeah, the kind of warm, wishy-washy way that we're getting on the other side of things is more appealing. And I don't know if you caught this. I only understood it when I saw the end credit stuff where they talked about it. That people are drawn to. I keep blanking his name.
Marcus.
Um, Marcus. People are drawn to him because his former followers fed him mother's eyes and they're radioactive. And so the odd energy that people are feeling when next to
Yes, I
him
see
is
Soul's energy
literally a
behind you.
radiation.
Yeah.
And that's what's making all the veins and all the stuff. And,
Yes.
because I was
Yes.
like, why did they
Oh my
shove the
god.
eyes in his mouth? And I'm sure they didn't think of it. They're just like, take this, choke on that.
Yeah.
But then the effect of it is like he's got part of mother in him now. And
Right.
this is creating this magnetism, literally. Uh,
That that's so interesting to me, because one of the most, fascinating things, little tidbits that we got, I think, in these episodes were about like the voices that people were hearing, and it like Mother and Paul, and Sue discovers that nope, there's actually a signal. There's a concrete reason for this. It can't
yeah.
penetrate through to where we are right now, but where we were before, you were hearing a signal. So it's these kinds of like things like, oh, you were hearing a signal, but only apparently certain people were hearing it, picking up on the frequency. That's interesting to me. Like, where's that coming from? What does that mean? You know, Now you're saying like
Yeah.
things like this, like Marcus has part of mother inside him. It's like this kind of radioactive energy, or this, I don't know if it's radioactive, I guess, but
They
this
call it
energy.
radioactive. That's the words they
Okay.
use. It's like,
Okay.
yeah,
So yeah, so he has this energy that's like literally drawing people, like, his new partner is like, "Oh, I sense,
they
I
feel weird
feel."
around him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So these kinds of things, these kind of like the unintended or side effects of technology and what this does and how this affects people, this is very interesting to me.
Yeah. And how this they have it lining up so well that it seems like fate. And so I'm always waiting for the
Mm-hmm.
moments when it's like, oh, we get the real explanation because when you look back at these things, they do have it structured in a way that's like, oh, this all seems like it's for a reason. It's all for a purpose. Now they come to this place, to this atheist camp, and they're welcomed in because mother knows, the AI that runs it. And she also took down the ship full of I wrote down the
Mithraic.
religion. Yeah, Mithraic. And then the the voices basically led her to giving birth to this snake and like just all these pieces that seem like because then they end up finding boxes that have logos from the religious text, and
Mm-hmm.
walls in the caves. It's just like they really do sell the idea that this is fated.
Yes.
And is everyone just playing their role in Soul's scheme, or
Or the
are we gonna
trust.
just, yeah, right? I don't know. I I I
I
I
mean,
think that,
I'm probably projecting a bit of Westworld into that just because, in that it's like literally this machine that orders everybody's lives,
hmm,
So I
mhm,
mean, there's still obviously the possibility that that's something to play out here too.
yep,
But
yeah.
yeah,
No,
obviously Soul too,
mhm.
because we
I
we're
see this
so
as
vague
like,
and undefined about what exactly soul is.
yeah. And how many times have we seen what appears like miracles? The
Mhm.
putting the hand in the thing, and then there's one person starts on fire, another person doesn't, or uh the voices telling people that are very accurate things. How would anyone know this?
Yes.
Um, I don't know. I at first we thought maybe the trust is soul, and this is, but then yeah, if the signal's coming from someplace else,
Yeah, what else
I don't
is
know.
that? I mean,
I see all these as D&D quests. It's like a video
mhm.
game lining up in my head. Okay, well, we can gain XP by gathering food, and then so that's the menial tasks for the village. And then we can go out and hunt a monster, kill the snake. But
Yep.
then there's this big overarching thing where, which society we going to side with? And there's this
Yes.
signal way out, we got a quest for. So it's
Yes.
perfectly set up to
I love it.
run a.
Speaking of
But
food, did you not every time somebody ate like a berry, were you not like, "People, you don't
yes,
know that
I
this
wrote a
is
couple.
safe?"
Yeah, I know. I'm like, have you seen no other science? I don't know. Just reality. Like, you don't just take a
Right?
random piece of something off
And
of a
just
tree and decide to eat it when you're not
right.
starving to death.
Right. Nobody tests it out at all. Like nobody takes tiny little bites. They're just like ripping it open and
Chomp. Well,
every
that's good.
time I just expected somebody to just
Yeah.
like
I want the parody version. I want this being done. It's like someone's eating, and oh, this is great. And all the kids just drop dead. Oh, I guess
yes.
this show's over, whatever.
Oh,
Cause they all just,
shoot.
yeah. And then some of it look gross.
Respawn
Like the things they,
elsewhere.
yeah. The, like, crusty
Jelly
kind of
things.
things that,
Yeah.
yeah, that didn't look good at all.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and I just
um,
I think I'm so trained by so many, pop culture references and stories and different scenarios to not trust anything that seems like paradise. I just,
yeah,
when you get somewhere that seems
right.
like lush and verdant and oh, how beautiful the garden, there's always poison. And I mean, I
Yeah,
know it harkens back obviously biblically. But
yeah.
it's such a recurring theme in pop culture that I felt like I was just so trained in that yeah, the first time they grabbed the
But if
fruit, I was like, "Ah!"
I think biblically that harkens back to reality. Like,
Well, right, yeah.
nothing is perfect. Is just the name of the game. Like, um,
Right, and it's
and
just like
some,
the garden is usually like the strongest collective symbol, you know,
yeah,
that
right.
we recognize is just such like an old story that everybody knows, whether you've, I think, been part of a religion or not.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure there are people, peasants that were ushered into someone's palace at some point. They're the
Mhm.
only ones with with a maintained garden and fruits that would no one could ever possibly afford or have access to. And one of them eats one, and the guy next to him learns
Mhm.
what happens when you do that. Your
Mhm.
hands are gone.
Yeah.
Your tongue is out, whatever it
Teeth.
is, like terrible thing. Life lesson. Gardens, they belong to someone else. I don't have
Exactly.
access,
Don't pluck the fruit, man.
Yep. So on a religious topic, I guess this is something we could
Sure.
probably talk about throughout the season. But the thing I always discuss or grapple with is, do humans by and large need not necessarily an organized religion, but a religion? They need something that directs them something to believe in that is greater than they are. And so if it's not a thing in the sky, if it's not a deity from above, then it's something else. So in this case in the show, it's the AI.
Mhm.
It's the trust, but this can be looked at anywhere in reality. It's always the debate of Christians for sure, or whatever. Is like, well, if
Mhm.
you don't have this thing, if you don't have these rules to life, if you don't feel like you're watched over, if you don't have this something that's higher than you, then you'll, you know, in their eyes, worship false idols, but
Mhm.
whatever it may be. Think I saw a meme or a cartoon recently talking about how someone's laughing. Oh, how yeah, it's so silly that you believe in these fairy tale things from a ancient textbook or wherever.
Mhm.
Meanwhile, the person is wearing like a Marvel cap and like DC everything or like Disney everything, and it's like, well, we all have our gods, and it was kind of so it's just like I mean, it's a trivial example or whatever, but how do you fall on this? Like, can people just exist just on rational thought and scientific evidence, or will humans always fall prey to needing something higher?
I personally would say no. I don't think that's always the case, because I mean, we have the term atheism for a reason. And I personally think there are many different kinds of atheism. Just because you've said, I don't believe in an organized religion, doesn't mean that there's one thing that you would turn to perhaps above all others. I think there are a multiplicity of things that you can believe in, um and not necessarily like hold, something like an AI, or like something like, you know, I don't know, the concept of scientific knowledge even, and just say like that's the thing. I think there are a multiplicity of things that you can construct and weave into like your own ideology, and feel safe and happy existing without the one thing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I want to agree. I think that it's a good goal for humanity. I just ultimately see that so often people fall prey to not having a purpose, and so something like religion, that no matter who you are, gives you purpose.
Mhm.
You are God's creation. You are God's child. You are, um, you have a destiny. You're fated to do this thing, and He loves you no matter what happens. That kind of thing. Um, and so someone that, especially a youth or someone young or whatever, they haven't done much of their lives yet or whatever, or maybe they fall upon hard times and all these things,
Mhm.
they don't have a purpose. And I think the like one of the most important things for the function of anyone is purpose. Now
Mhm.
you've created purpose for yourself. Like you have a kid, so obviously now like you have ultimate purpose.
Mhm.
But a lot of people don't, or they don't. I mean, what if they don't see it that way, or whatever?
Or they can't,
People
yeah.
need purpose, and so if they don't have purpose from their lives, and they don't have purpose from a higher power, they have to seek purpose from something else.
Mhm.
They have to find because otherwise you're miserable. You will live a shallow, terrible life if you do not feel that you have purpose. So it
Mhm.
drives people into depression.
Mhm.
People hate their jobs. I hate my job. Sucks. So they don't feel like they have purpose there. They don't feel like they're doing something important. Or you wouldn't hate your job so much because you feel you're contributing to something valuable to society.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know. I just think I just think I'm an atheist, but I feel like it's a problem. I always talk about how, would I pose the question to people, would the world be a better place if just like most of America was actually practicing Christians? Even though I don't think it's true or right or
Mhm.
correct in any way. Um, are the good lessons we decide to choose good enough? And
Mhm.
is the purpose given good enough to create a better society, even if it's based on a lie?
Mhm.
And I don't mean to offend any like devout religious people watching or anything like that.
Yeah.
Perfectly, I'd love for you to write in. I love talking about it. So
Hmm. Well, I mean, yeah, it's obviously interesting for me living in a household where, I mean, Chris isn't obviously like, I would say, super religious, though.
not a
Obviously,
Bible
that's a
thumper.
right. I mean, it's a very indefinable term, and everybody's
Right.
level can be different about what they consider super religious. But obviously, he is a Lutheran pastor's son, and grew up in the religious community. Has been baptized and things like that. And I know there's a degree of belief there, though I've never sat down and interrogated him on tell me point by point.
Yeah.
you
Right.
know but it is different for me because I did not grow up with organized religion, even though both of my parents are baptized. They chose, for a number of reasons, not to baptize me. Some of it, I think, consciously, and some of it not. And so, therefore, I didn't belong to organized religion. So I grew up kind of outside of that. I grew up, with a healthy skepticism, I think, of the concept, and have kept that into adulthood. So it's a very interesting thing to balance in my own house. Um,
Yep.
and then now with our child, obviously that's a big
Right.
question about where does that go? Where do our belief systems go when they're in opposition to one another? How can we work that out?
Yep. Yep. Well, I have all sorts of unsolicited advice I could give, but I won't. Uh, but yeah, no, it's definitely um, it's tricky. I mean,
Mhm,
I know Ashley and I had talked about that before. I remember pretty heated conversation. The four of us walking
mhm.
back from Robert Street or whatever one day.
Yeah.
Yes, it's good.
Yeah, I
So
mean, it's obviously, religion is something that is personal. It's not just, a concept. It's not just like a governing concept by which you intellectually live your life. It's a belief system. So beliefs, therefore, by their very nature, their very connotation, their context, are something you feel strongly, you know. So there,
mhm.
yeah, it's not something that you can often argue dispassionately about, which is one
Yeah,
of the tricky things. Of course, for me, in that arena, I'm probably, even though I'm an emotional person, I'm probably the most logical I'll ever be, because I don't have that. I
right.
believe in what I believe in, but it's not the same structure. It's not the same thing.
Yeah. Well, because it's inherently to I would say to a non-believer odd to have much that's faith-based.
Mhm.
You know, the idea of faith is literally to take something without evidence,
Mhm.
which seems so wrong. Now, we take a lot of things on faith on a daily basis, but they're
Well,
not things that necessarily change our lives.
mhm.
And if they were to, like, if, hey, no, you need to change the way you live your life and have faith because
Mhm.
that's a different thing than having faith that, yeah. But even when I think of things, I'm trying to think of an example. I'm like, well, but it's because I have past experience, because I have evidence to go to support this.
Well, and oftentimes where I find myself, in the finding some footing in kind of a debate or a discussion or a conversation about religion, is the fact that I actually find the idea of faith very logical.
Okay.
That I find the idea that, I am a person of faith. Okay, I have faith in a higher being or a higher purpose. I get that concept. I don't generally get the concept of naming it, because to me the idea of faith is that you don't know but you believe anyway. But the idea of organized religion is saying, "Oh, but we know, you know, the story of God, the story of Jesus, in terms of
Right.
Christianity. Of course, in other religions there are other names, other gods, other stories."
Right.
So the idea to me of faith being something you believe in without knowing it, and then the idea of organized religion saying, "Oh, we know all these things," to me that's antithetical. You can't have
Sure.
faith in something you don't know about if you, on the other hand, say, well, we know all about it. So that's kind of where I get tripped up sometimes in the idea of structured religion.
Mhm. Yeah.
And it's something I've
But
never
it's
quite
still
gotten past in terms
but
of,
it's but if you say, "Well, I know that there's the," if you phrase it in the way that, well, you're saying you know that this is God and this is Jesus and this will happen, someone should respond to saying, "Well, I don't know that. I have, but I choose to have faith."
mhm. And
So, I
that to
mean,
me makes more sense. It's just the idea of, religion is that it's named, something is named. Like, to me, the very basis of the building block is like, how could you even know a name? Like,
right.
how could you say for certain? Again, when you say somebody says like, well, I have faith that this is God or something, and my first immediate reaction is to say, how do you know it's not Allah? How do you know it's not
Well,
Buddha?
but
How
that's
do you
just a
know it's not
different
Shiva?
translation of the same.
How do you know
I
it's
mean,
not Zeus and all of his 1,200, fellow gods and goddesses?
see, but that I would argue is a little different because Zeus is a specific deity.
Mhm.
God is the term for the omnipresent being. So Allah is just the a different language's term for an ever present omnipresent being,
Mhm.
you know? So I would get that for sure with like a Zeus or something because that is giving a name to a god. It gets more complicated
Mhm.
it's when it's all encompassing. We gotta shove all these
Yeah.
gods into one. But
Yeah. So, yeah, it's a very
w-
interesting, concept to the idea of faith and the concept of knowing. And
right.
part of that, here, obviously bringing it kind of back around to Raised by Wolves. After a very interesting, I mean, obviously, to me anyway, side
hmm
tangent there, is, yeah, it's, you know, setting up what, these people believe are two different systems, but us as the viewer kind of getting the clue in that they're not all that different. It's just the thing you choose to put your belief into.
Yep. And I appreciate a show like this that because we're able to look at this dispassionately because it's not anything that's from Earth or whatever, And so it's a great setup and I wish more shows were competent enough to do this because whatever they want to teach you or instruct or inform or make you ask questions of or whatever, they're not hitting you over the head with it.
Hmm.
It's the glory of science fiction and fantasy that you can have and make these really complicated discussions go on in your head,
Hmm.
and you can do it dispassionately because you're not bound to it emotionally.
Right.
And that's the kind of thing that Hollywood really wants. They want to be able to change your mind and make you think what they think. Well, this is a much better way to do it. To to welcome discussions and to have something that's thoughtful and disconnected.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say when you're talking about intellectual concepts, this is the way to go. I mean, obviously, I think some things, some stories are just simply meant to, evoke sympathy, empathy, you know, um,
For
appreciation of
something
the small
specific.
things. Yeah, like, um, I don't know, appreciating the relationships that you have, thinking about like the fact that you're not alone. I think concepts like that are, obviously very suited to a movie and something being made in the reality that we know on the earth that we know. But yeah, something
Sure.
like overarching like this, like when you're thinking about belief systems, be they, you know, based in logic and reason, as like, your kind of core guiding principles above all else, or, a faith in a higher power and a higher being as your core. Something like this, like you said, is perfect because you can argue it dispassionately because it's not anything literal. It's not anything
Yeah.
real. It's not anything you're already part of or not
Yep.
part of.
Yep. Yep. All right. Well, I'm happy to get into that because I'm sure there'll be more interesting things between these factions and some of that as we move forward. Um, is there some stuff we want to bring up in episode 2 at all, or I mean, we kind of like jumped between everything a little bit. Um, oh, what did I write when it was so awkward? There was a really awkward moment.
Sure.
Um, God, I this is the problem with the stream of conscious, Andrea. You just write it and there's no context. I don't
Yeah, I
know what
know.
I
I've taken to, like, writing longer sentences so I can, like,
Mhm,
or writing, like, keywords for myself so I can remember. Um,
mhm.
was it the apology that the guy had to come
No,
make? Because that was very, like, town cry or medieval, like, ringing
right.
through the streets. It was very funny to me.
No, it's
Um,
something where they're talking about like how I think how terrible androids are or someone died or something. It was a really yeah, it was a really shoot. I don't know.
okay.
That's my fault. I always spend too much time looking up a GIF to represent my present feeling as opposed to like writing down what what it was
Oh,
about.
is it the moment in, when father and the children are collecting things and then that guy walks by and is like, oh, father's like, "Good morning," and the guy is like, "Get out of here." Do you
No.
remember what I'm talking about?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
When
because
'cause father's like, "Oh, I feel so happy and safe and warm
yeah.
and this is everything we need. Morning, my good neighbor." And he's like, basically like,
n-
"F you and your, you know,
Yeah,
religious child who should get the F out of here."
right.
And
Yep.
it was just like a very it was a very like, "Whoa, whoopsie.
Yep.
Sorry, father." He had some misplaced enthusiasm.
Yeah, I feel
You're
like
right
that's
though
in
when you
the
wrote, "Father's too good for these people," because he is. He's the best.
yeah, I mean, he's been a
And I was very
constant in
upset.
the show.
Yeah, I was very upset when they suggested sacrificing father as bait for the snake monster.
I know,
Get
right?
out of here with that. Nuh-uh.
Yep. Well, fortunately, he's leading the people to be bait. So
Yes.
hopefully he's
Hopefully
better
he's gonna
off
be
here.
fine. Yeah. But
He's not
yeah.
going to smell human and like tasty, so probably.
Well, yeah, which is hilarious because these people obviously don't know that this snake monster was birthed from mother.
Right.
So probably
Yeah.
doesn't have quite the same appetites as like a random beast of the wild.
Yeah.
So
And what
yeah.
did you I still feel like we need a little more explanation at some point because then mother starts lactating.
Yes.
I'm like
Yes, and I was like
this
trying
is
I'm sorry.
biology. Wow.
I know, I know. Cause and then I was like sitting there trying to figure out like how that would work, like how it was gonna get there,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that was very interesting. That she had this like biological, clearly involuntary response.
Yeah.
Um,
It's
yeah, and then they started talking later about the snake monster being like a baby trying to communicate.
mhm.
And,
Yep.
obviously it views Campion as its like brother, which we, the audience, sort of get clued in on, but Campion doesn't know because he's not
Right. Yeah,
aware.
he went right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
So
it's a
yeah,
lot of
still so many unanswered questions about how this
yep.
is all going to work, and I'm hoping we get to some, maybe not the ultimate, but some big step of a payoff in the next few episodes.
Yep. Yep. Um yeah, I'm just looking if there's something else. Oh, violence is pain, compliance is life.
Mhm.
I love that the atheists almost have more mantra than the theists at this point. So I love
Mhm.
that.
Hatred is pain,
Um
pain is hatred. That was the other one
mhm.
that they spouted, which
Yep.
yeah, they're such like weirdly complex concepts boiled down into these very simple statements that are like, well, I mean, sort of, if you think of it this way, I could see where you're coming from, but I'm not really sure what you're meaning here because I have no context. It's
Yeah.
very strange.
Yep. Well, I like all the questions being asked. I
Hmm.
like the conflicts being set up and the relationships, seeing where they're going to go and how they're going to develop. And so I think it's a pretty good start to
Yeah.
season 2.
Yeah, I liked one last thing I want to say is I like the theme that keeps kind of recurring here in these first two episodes about the concept of truth and who has a right to know what. Paul and
Mm,
Campion are having that argument about, you know, you should forgive Sue. She didn't mean to keep things from you. And Paul's like, well, she kept all this stuff from me. And, I'm glad that the voices told me the truth. And Campion's like, well, are you better off? Like, is that
right.
really a good thing? So that was an interesting concept. And then I noted again, um, there was like a concept of, you know, truth and like telling somebody something.
Well, and it's not like that's new because I mean, it's red pill versus blue pill. It's
Right.
the ignorance is bliss or whatever kind of thing. So, but yeah, I like it being brought up in more ways.
Hmm. Yeah. I can't.
Well, there was something else related to that you were talking about. That's
Yeah, and I thought it had to do
uh,
again. I think Mother
that,
tried to keep something else from Campion.
well, she was gonna lie about she found the cube, the
Yes,
artifact,
yes,
in to save Campion from looking like a bad friend.
right. But I think she was maybe gonna tell. She was talking about talking about father and telling him, don't tell anybody about the snake monster because I'm gonna kill it and it's gonna be fine. Campion
Hmm.
not knowing about any of this stuff. So yeah, so there's a lot of idea of like, does intent matter when telling someone the truth or keeping the truth from them? Um,
Yeah,
that I just feel like it's going to be playing out in a lot of different dynamics
yeah,
and
and like you
relationships in this
say, like
season.
showing how much more emotionality
Hmm.
mother and father seem to be bringing here.
Yes.
That they're falling into these pitfalls
Hmm.
of humanity of like yeah keeping secrets and judging when that's appropriate or not when you
Right.
think that they seem to preach earlier about honesty being of the utmost
Right.
so
Exactly.
um I'll also say too that you mentioned the acid sea and stuff.
Yeah.
So and one of they showed this in an end credit thing too behind the scenes. They talked that the acidic nature of the water comes from those whirlpools. They go
Right.
down into the core and are where there's the magma and the weird stuff, and that's what's
Yep.
turning the water acidic. And I I'm interested in just the structure of this planet. The idea of having holes that would go through the planet and
Hmm.
that the planet would still maintain a stable atmosphere and all this
Hmm.
stuff seems unlikely, but
Hmm.
maybe I'm just not filled in on the latest physics here, astrophysics. So yeah, but
Yeah. I yeah, I thought it was very interesting. I mean, it's certainly, a way to set this planet apart from Earth. You know
hmm
what I mean? Like, oh, look at how strange we have acid seas. Again, it's something we sort of buy into without much explanation of
yep,
like you say, there's an explanation here, but we're not exactly being told how that works.
yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
right, hmm
So, yeah. I
yep,
just had trouble a bit with the I felt inconsistencies of the acid sea.
okay,
Where they're running for the caves in the second episode, and they're touching like part of the wave that comes up. It's tiny, but it's like the first dribbles of the waves of the tide that's coming in, and they run through it, and nobody's soles of their boots seem to be burned. And then 2 seconds later, the tide really comes in to get the collective
hmm
guards that are following them, and then just like acid, eats them away immediately. And I was just like, ah,
all they needed was one shot of one because
smoking
I
shoe.
think
I just needed
yep
that. That's it.
because I Yep. One shot, stepping and a singe because I think they didn't do it because we saw that earlier that it does do that.
Right.
But
That
just it should be a reminder that they're cutting this really close because their
yes.
boots are getting singed.
Yes.
So I
The danger
so I
increases for
yeah.
us, on both fronts, and it just provides that extra level of consistency.
Yep.